What's the emotion and what is the state that is driving your cognitions? In my opinion, that is more significant than the thoughts themselves. My name is Justin Sunseri. I'm a trauma therapist and coach and the creator of the Polyvagal Trauma Relief System. This episode is actually a clip from a meetup with my course members. So if you're interested in being a student, this will give you not only a deep lesson, but also some insight into what the meetups look like that happen twice a month. Welcome to Stuck Not Broken, where I teach you how to finally get relief from trauma using clear language and practical techniques.
Can you talk a little bit, and maybe it's just like normalizing it for me, or just I feel like I'm noticing like grief emotions coming up as I become aware of how mm, like how familiar unsafety feels, or like being, aware and moving into safety, and then kind of feeling like you were sharing, like being dysregulated in that safety. And then there's feelings of like actually like anger too. So then I'm wondering if that could be, and maybe I'm getting too far ahead of myself, but could that, is it, I know that Justin, you're not into like parts work, and I do really resonate with blending parts work. So I'm trying to avoid like using the term parts work, but
You
like,
can use them, I just won't understand what the heck you're talking
okay.
about.
Okay. I mean, it feels like there's like parts of me that are kind of like moving out of shutdown, and like I'm feeling that kind of like fight energy. But then it's like there's also the parts that are moving out of like fight energy into safety. I don't know. I kind of like see it and feel it. Like it's like there's different things that are happening at once.
Okay.
Um, So like, yeah, anything about just working with the grief that comes up, or working with the emotions that come up, like kind of with these realizations.
You're in Polyvagal 101?
Yeah. But
Okay.
I mean, I've like done a lot of polyvagal looking at,
Yeah.
and read like over the past few years, like working on
Okay.
doing a lot of trauma therapy without, I also just want to acknowledge like how beautiful and gentle your approach is, because there's so much like just diving into it without having the safety, and
No,
like
no, no,
that
no, don't do that.
sucks. That really has sucked. So,
Absolutely. So I'm glad you actually brought that up. And so, because it brought up this metaphor in my mind that maybe would work
okay.
for, see if we can tie this together. Okay. As we anchor more in safety, I have this image in my mind, and it's actually came up in a session this week. And so it popped up in my mind again right now of as we anchor in safety and begin to delve into the stuck state, the defensive state, we don't want to push too far. Things are going to come up. And so it's like we anchor, 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 and then mindfully attempt to experience the stuck defensive state. So the image in my mind is like this army that's kind of like marching forward, just like little by little. And instead of like rushing into battle and diving into trauma memories and parent stuff and whatever else, we just inch forward slowly but surely. And every step of the way we're anchoring in safety. Yes, go forward. Yes, go forward. Like that. That's kind of the image in my mind of how this works. So every step you go forward, stuff's going to come up. You know what I mean? And maybe it's grief or anger or loss or whatever, anxiety, flashbacks. It could be all kinds of stuff come up. But every step you go forward, stuff's going to come along with it. It's defensive stuff. Does that make sense so far? And does that apply to what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, it does. What's coming up is like, what has already happened though is that army had was like marched in and like allowed everything to come up, and so it's like that has, I'm like back in more regulation, but it's like I can't unknow what has already kind of been like stirred up.
Right. That was from previous like therapy or something.
Yeah, well, it was from like it's actually like a spiritual teacher that, was teaching methods of like, let's apply like I get the concept, but again, it needs to have this it was not trauma informed at all. And so it
Right.
was like, let's go back through Erik Erikson's stages of development and then like apply these like spiritual modalities and like dig into like each time period. And it was literally like a
Jesus
1 day
Christ.
thing. It was like one day, it was like, we're gonna
Oh my
meditate on this
God.
grief
I'm
experience
sorry. I don't mean to
and we're gonna
judge, but
like we're gonna like
come on,
dig it
people.
out and we're gonna clear these emotions and then we're gonna go to the next thing. And then yeah, it was just like successive. And I mean, it really put me into like a really, I think I spent too much time like just it was just too much. I didn't have the level of safety to be able to, feel all of that. So
Okay.
um
Let's try and stay general here.
okay.
Okay. Stuff comes up and we can't like unremember it. We can't exactly move backwards, right?
Right.
So my a couple things I'm thinking of, which is of course we return to grounding and safety. Okay, all the BSA stuff that is the priority when it comes to this overall system I've put together. The priority is safety, and so as stuff comes up, memories or narratives or feelings, whatever it is, like fine, okay, here it is. I see you. Let me stick you in my pocket. I'm going to ground in safety while you exist here. Like it's art. Like we can't ignore that. That's what it is, right? But we ground in safety until we get to a point where we can say, okay, now I'm ready to feel this a bit more. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's all. That's UDS, and that's a whole bunch of UDS techniques.
Mhm.
And the way I don't know how deeply you want me to go into that, but
I wanted to maybe if you could weave it this way, Justin, because
oh my goodness,
the thing that I
sorry.
found kind of profound, because I listened to Deb Dana's stuff a
Yeah,
lot, and I really have found it to be true. It's exactly what you're saying, which is that ventral vagal from a place of safety, the possibilities and from a spiritual perspective, in my opinion, the life force is much more accessible, so that there are, it's that moment, it's that place. And so kind of what you're saying is what I've been practicing, and my BSA is such an important foundational piece for me, but I've been doing it sort of more, not as methodically as BSA, and that's why I wanted to get the anchors, but just like find cues of safety, find glimmers, take them in, drink them in, and then so it's not like I'm doing it to go figure out how to handle the army that's moved into my territory. It's just like I'm putting that
right.
in the side, and I know that that's there, and I'll have more capacity, and there'll be more possibilities. So right now I'm going to find cues of safety.
Help me, both of you or all three of you. Help me, give me a generalize this more. How can I address this in a more general kind of way? So if you could narrow that down into one question, what would that be? Because they're huge topics.
Okay. So if you've been like re-traumatized by the trauma stuff, what I mean, I guess I'm feeling like it's just more anchoring in safety and compassion and patience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's
I
like
guess
I think that
it's, and maybe this will help us, because you said from the perspective of the getting unstuck course, how does the anchoring and safety, like, because I know you had the techniques, because I was one of the people that previewed it, that
oh yeah
made things, so I'm familiar with it, but I know it was, you were just showing us pieces and parts, but
yeah
it's like, is there a process of you know, when you get to the point when you've got enough safety built in, do you
Yep.
also ground in safety before you do any UDS technique? Okay.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. That's why BSA is so absolutely essential, is that in order to go into UDS, you have to be able to sit with your feelings, which means you have to stay anchored in your safety state. That vagal brake has to be on. So all the concepts from Polyvagal 101 and BSA go directly into UDS. Like, I really designed this to like flow into each other. Okay. So yeah, it's we I think this is maybe what I'm struggling with here. Besides this is part of, I'm all over the place. All right, let's do one thing at a time. I don't do parts work, obviously. I'm also an atheist. So spirituality, thinking of ourselves as having spirits or souls, or from I'm super materialistic, so I can't meet you on that level. I get it. I was raised Catholic. I mean, I get the basic idea of souls and spirituality and whatnot. But I'm extremely concrete. I exist right here, right now. My biology, my atoms. That's about it. So whenever I hear these spirituality and parts work and whatever else, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, hold on, bring it back to right here, right now, in the moment, in your body. If you want to add on the other stuff, fine, but can we share language of what's happening right here, right now? So that's one thing that's kind of on my mind, is translating what you're saying into something I can understand. And I don't. So when it comes to my coursework, it's very concrete. It's what's really happening right here, right now. No other stuff, right? So there's that. The other thing that's coming to my mind is dysregulation is dysregulation. We attribute it to the source. So that practice that I went to, that therapist that re-traumatized me, the spiritual, 1 day retreat, and it's like, yeah, it sounds awful, and we can validate that and agree, right? But the dysregulation is the dysregulation. So rather than us looking at things like, well, how do I re-regulate after being re-regulated or dysregulated, or how do I re-regulate after being re-traumatized? It's, well, you're adding a layer onto it. Let's just bring it back to, you're dysregulated. Okay, got it. As far as like the why of it, it adds this layer that I don't think is necessary when it really comes down to feeling what you're feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Your body doesn't know why you're dysregulated. You know what I'm saying? Like, your body doesn't know. All it's doing is reacting. Your brain has a concept of why you're dysregulated. It can attribute a story to it, and it's valid. It's better. It's valid. I'm not trying to invalidate this stuff or minimize or whatever. But when it comes down to it, when you look inward, your body is dysregulated. It's not attributing meaning to it.
Mm-hmm.
You with me?
Yeah, that actually is really helpful, because even just removing a story from it, it's kind of another way to just go into a mental, just to stay out of the body. But I do love bringing
Right.
it back to the basic biology, and actually none of that really matters. Where am I right now?
That's it. So
Yeah.
that's how I've conceptualized and how I bring this. So that's what I'm bringing is, now if you want to add on other stuff, cool, run with it. I can't do that for you. I can't meet you there. But yeah, that's exactly it. And so when we get to the UDS stuff, so you've completed a BSA, or you're continuing to practice BSA because it's never really done, but you get the skills to keep practicing it and build a strength to your vagal brake. So you're doing all that, and then you go to UDS. When you start to look inwards at the SSIEC, the cognitions, emotions, impulses, state, and sensations, when you start to look at those things, it's a lot easier to get caught up in the cognitions and to stay there. And one of those cognitions might be, well, this person's to blame for the way I feel. And that might be valid. That might be completely valid. But we don't want to stay there, because when it comes to re-regulating, that story may not be serving that purpose, even though it's true and valid and important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the cognitions are significant, but that's a clue as to maybe where we need to go. And what I mean by that is if we can have the cognition of this person mistreating me and that's why I'm traumatized, I'm keeping it very loose in general. Well, what I'm more interested in, and for the coursework, is what's the flavor of that cognition? Is it acceptance? And you're saying like, yeah, I was mistreated and that's why I feel like this. Is it acceptance? Is it an aha moment? Is it something like that? Or is it, man, what an asshole. I can't believe they did that to me, which might be valid. And I can agree with you on that, on whatever it is. Like, yeah, it's valid. So the flavor of it is going to give you an indication of what's happening inside of you. So I don't want people to get caught up in the cognition, the thought, the story. Okay, so this person's a jackass and they mistreated me and how they're so narcissistic. And it's like, okay, that might be true, fine. But is that a calm stillness sort of reflecting on reality, or is it a blaming, fight flavored reflection of reality? The reality still could be true. I'm not saying that. It's more about what's driving that. What's the emotion and the state ultimately that's driving that. So the cognition of this is why I'm dysregulated or re-traumatized could be valid and true. Cool. What's the flavor of it? How do we dig deeper from that, from the cognition to the emotion to sensations of it, and then ultimately, hopefully, down to an impulse stemming from that. But this is all UDS stuff that I dig way deeper into and throughout the course. Okay, so conceptually, does this address kind of what's coming up as far as the questions go?
Yeah, I think it really helps to simplify it.
MJ, does this address kind of what your question about bringing up as well, as far as safety and whatnot? I think you'd asked or was it Robin? Someone brought up safety and UDS, like safety and then do you ground in safety and then work on the stuck defensive state? So do you see how it connects?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think what you said about the cognition taking hold when you go to the SSIC, and I can see that.
Yeah.
As Megan said, it's not only simplifies it, it actually just it's simplified, but it really takes away the driving force of the story or the cognition, or it takes away the elements that are kind of fragmenting, that kind of create some of the fragmentation, I feel.
That's, yeah, I like that word, fragmenting. And in UDS, the word I use is linking, where we're connecting these pieces. So that cognition, it's directly connected to your polyvagal state. We just have to like link it. We have to, rather than getting caught up in the cognition, we want to link that to the emotion that's driving it, and then we want to take that emotion and link it to the sensations or impulses, but usually sensations, and then link that to an underlying impulse that needs to be completed or acted upon or felt. Thank you so much for listening, fellow Stuckna. I do hope that this episode has been a helpful resource for you in your process of learning and applying the polyvagal theory to your trauma recovery.
This podcast is not therapy, not intended to be therapy or be a replacement for therapy. Nothing in this creates or indicates a therapeutic relationship. Please consult with your therapist or seek for one in your area if you are experiencing mental health symptoms. Nothing in this podcast should be construed to be specific life advice. It is for educational and entertainment purposes only. More resources are available in the description of this episode and in the footer of justinlmft.com.